सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। सर्ववेदान्तसिद्धान्त गोचरं तमगोचरं गोविन्दं परमानन्दं सद्गुरुं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम्। So today in this session we will take up the topic Atma. So we have seen Anatma, the Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira. They all fall under the category of Anatma. Now the question is, what is Atma? Who am I? What is my true nature? If I am not this physical body, if I am not this body, mind and intellect, then who am I? So now we are going to see different terms used in the scriptures to describe Atma, which Bhagavan Shankaracharya has lavishly used in Vivekachūdāamani. These are the terms borrowed from the Upanishads and other scriptures. And these terms are repeated very many times in very many verses. Hundreds of verses in Vivekachūdāamani are only repetitions of these terms. So we are going to see the important 15 terms. 15 terms which describe the Ātma-tattva, the truth of the self. So let's start. The first one, Sat. Sat. Sat means existence. Second one, Chit. Chit. Chit means consciousness. Third one, Anandaha. Anandaha means bliss. Fourth one, Anantaha. Anantaha means infinite. Fifth one, Achalaha. Achalaha means that which doesn't move, unmoving. Sixth one, Nityaha. Nityaha means eternal. Seventh one, Kūtasthaha. Kūtasthaha means unchanging, free from all modifications. Eighth one, Indriya agocharaha. Indriya agocharaha means that which cannot be perceived by the sense organs. Indriya agochara. Ninth one, achintya, that which cannot be perceived by the mind. Achintya, unthinkable, that which cannot be thought of. Achintya. Tenth one, aprameya, which cannot become prameya. Aprameya. Prama means knowledge. Prameya means object of knowledge. So aprameya means which cannot become an object of knowledge. 11th one, anirdeshya. Anirdeshya means indescribable. 12th one, Atma. Atma means the self. 13th one, Sākshī. Sākshī means witness, observer. 14th one, Akarta. Akarta means non-doer. 15th one, Abhokta. Abhokta means non-enjoyer. So these are the 15 terms mentioned in the Upanishads in order to describe our true self. So if we have understood these 15 terms thoroughly, we have understood the entire description of Atma mentioned in all the scriptures. So now let us start with Sat. Yesterday we had discussed a little about Sat. So what is Sat? Sat means existence. What kind of existence? Absolute existence. Pure existence. Eternal existence. Unborrowed existence. Independent existence. Self-existence. It is of the nature of easeness. I-S-N-E-S-S. It is of the nature of easeness, which is experienced in ourselves as amness. A-M-N-E-S-S. Amness. So what is this absolute existence? That existence which can never become non-existent. Why it can never become non-existent? It can never become non-existent because existence is its nature. So whenever the term nature is used, we have no right to ask why. So if I say heat is the nature of fire, you should not ask why. Sweetness is the nature of sugar. Don't ask why, because it is its swabhava, it is its nature. That's how that thing is. Full stop. No howing and whying. So Sat means absolute existence which can never become non-existent. Sat is called absolute existence because it is the one which gives existence to everything else. If there is anything else other than Sat appearing to exist, then understand that thing has only a borrowed existence, borrowed from Sat. So if anything appears to exist, it is only an appearance. What exists is Sat alone. The existence of Sat has been misunderstood as existence of that thing. Now please keep this in mind. This Sat is none other than Atma, our true self. So what does the above statement imply? The above statement implies that Supreme Self alone exists, which means I alone exist, which means anything I see other than me doesn't exist. If at all I see something other than me, it is only a borrowed existence. It is only an illusory existence, not its own intrinsic, inherent existence. Just like a dream. So many things we see in the dream, but what gives existence to these dream things, beings and happenings? After waking up, I come to realize that these dream things have no existence other than me. My existence was misunderstood as dream world's existence. In the same way, the Supreme Self as pure consciousness alone exists. So the truth is, I am, therefore the world is. In our ignorance, we say, the world is, therefore I am. Yet Jnani, after realization, says, I am, therefore the world is. Mayyeva sakalam jatam, mai sarvam pratishthitam, mai sarvam layam yati, tad brahma advayam asmyaham. Mayyeva sakalam jatam, from me everything has come. Mai sarvam pratishthitam, in me everything is sustained. Mai sarvam layam yati, unto me everything is resolved. Tad brahma advayam asmyaham, that non-dual Brahman am I. This Sat can have different names depending upon the context. For example, another name of Sat is Mithya Jagat Adhishthanam, the substratum for the illusory world. Another name of Sat can be Ekaha, the only one. Another name of Sat can be Advayaha, non-dual. Another name of Sat can be Vishuddhaha. Vishuddha means pure, that which cannot stand anything else in it. You cannot adulterate it. It is and it alone is. That's why it is pure, Vishuddha. In this way, there can be very many names, terms, which can imply the meaning of Sat. So what should a Vedantic meditator do? At the seat of meditation, try to feel it, experience it. Feel that existence in you and then superimpose all the Vedantic descriptions of Atma unto that existence. So experience the existence and then feel. It is not my existence, but it is God's existence. God alone is present, not me. Again and again, using these Vedantic terminologies, experience oneself not as the existence of Jiva, but experience oneself as the existence of Brahman, which is Satchit Anand. This process is called Nididhyāsanam. Mere intellectual understanding is Mananam, but feeling it, experiencing it becomes Nididhyāsanam. When this practice is continued for a long period of time, slowly, slowly the experience of the properties of Brahman starts becoming natural to us. Gradually, the I am Jiva thought is replaced by I am Brahman feeling. When that I am Brahman feeling becomes firm, then that state is called Brahma-nishtha. Now at present, in our state of ignorance, we are having Jīva-nishtha. We are firmly convinced and we intimately feel and experience that this existence in me is the existence of my limited body, mind, intellect. So this I am body, mind, intellect is called Aham-vritti. This Aham-vritti has to be replaced by Brahmākāra-vritti. How do you do it? Experience your existence and superimpose that existence with the descriptions of the reality. The next term is Chit. Chit means consciousness, the knowing principle in us, the awareness principle in us. I know, I am aware of, I am conscious of. Again, consciousness is something which we intimately experience. So feel that experience of knowing. Feel that knowing happening in you. Feel that awareness happening in you. The sense organs are knowing the sense objects. The sense organs are conscious of the sense objects. The mind is conscious of the thoughts. Mind is knowing the thoughts. But who has given the sense organs and the mind the ability to know? That factor which gives them the ability to know is called consciousness. In fact, consciousness alone knows. The property of knowing has been borrowed by the sense organs and the mind, and hence they are capable of knowing. By themselves, they are not capable of knowing because they are inert. Now, what is the difference between knowing of consciousness and knowing of the mind? Consciousness knowing is effortless, is spontaneous, is uninterrupted. It is perfect knowing. But the knowing of the mind intellect, it is effortful and imperfect. The mind intellect knowing is imperfect knowing because it is only capable of reflected knowing, borrowed knowing. Any reflection is always an imperfection. The sunlight gets reflected in a mirror, but that reflection in the mirror is nowhere near to the original sun. There is no comparison. In the same way, the mind-intellect equipment, no doubt, is capable of reflecting the knowing principle of consciousness. Mind-intellect equipment being a subtle instrument, it is capable of reflecting the knowing property of consciousness. But there is a big difference between knowing of consciousness and knowing of the mind intellect. Now, how to meditate upon this consciousness? We meditate upon the knowing aspect, the awareness principle of consciousness. So at the seat of meditation, I am conscious of the sound, the smell, etc. I am conscious of the thoughts in my mind. So now pay attention, not what you hear, what you see, but with what you hear, with what you see. So in this Vedantic meditation, You don't pay attention to the contents of what you are aware of, but instead you pay attention to the very awareness principle itself, because of which you are aware of. Then you are paying attention to none other than the Lord Himself, because this awareness principle in you is none other than the Supreme Lord. Then you become a greatest bhakta, because you are seeking God alone and nothing else. So when you are paying attention to consciousness in you, you are paying attention to God, and thus you can be called a greatest bhakta. When you are interested in the contents of consciousness, the thoughts appearing in consciousness, then you are seeking the world, because thoughts are nothing but the thoughts of the world. So if you are a world seeker, in fact if you are a thought seeker, if your attention is upon the thoughts, you are seeking the world, and when you are seeking the world, you are called a samsari. But if your attention is upon consciousness, if you are seeking consciousness, then you are called a sannyāsī. This is the true definition of sannyas. Samyak nyāsaha sannyāsaha. Giving up very well. Samyak means very well. Nyāsaha means giving up. The one who has given up very well. So what has to be given up? Our attachment to the thoughts. The thoughts represent the world. So giving up the world at the seat of meditation is expressed as paying attention to consciousness alone. So what is it that you give up? You give up the contents of consciousness. And what is it that you take up? You take up consciousness. You pay attention to consciousness. So world is nothing but the contents of consciousness. Are you interested in consciousness, or are you interested in the contents? That will decide whether you are a sannyasi or a samsari. In Vedantic meditation, your entire attention is shifted to consciousness. That consciousness because of which you are conscious of the world and experiences. Why is it that we are knowing the world? Why is it that we are aware of the world? We are aware of the world because we sought something other than the truth. Somewhere in the past, we desired something other than the truth, and therefore we are seeing the world in front of us. Now, when you desire to know the truth, this world will disappear. The law is, if you desire, you will see. If you desire, you will get. If you desire, you will experience. Now, why are we desiring something other than the truth? We desire to know something other than the truth because the mind is impure. An impure mind will want to know something other than the truth, whereas a pure mind will have the desire for truth and truth alone. So an impure mind is not interested in the truth. It is interested only in the worldly objects and pleasures. Hence the thoughts in an impure mind are always something other than the truth. Who has trained the mind to seek something other than the truth? We ourselves had trained our mind. So from avidya comes kama. What is kama? Kama is the desire to know something other than the truth. Knowing continues, but the question is, what is it that you want to know? That day, when you say, no, enough is enough, I want to know the truth and truth alone. When there is such an intense desire to know the truth, so then, under the guidance of Guru and Shastra, when such a mind which seeks only the truth, When such a mind becomes inward looking, such an introverted mind sees itself as pure consciousness. And then it sees all thoughts as nothing but ripples in pure consciousness. And at the seat of meditation, when the mind is hushed to silence, consciousness alone remains and the world disappears. World is nothing but pure consciousness, distorted by an impure mind. Pure consciousness, seen through a distorting medium of impure mind, is called the world. When that mind is purified and hushed to silence, the distorting medium disappears, and then the truth is seen as it is, as pure consciousness. A beautiful example is given to make this point clear. When a fireball is rotated fast, what do we see? We see a solid, bright ring of fire. The ring appears so solid that we don't even doubt the existence of that solid ring. But when we slow down the speed of rotation, what do we see? We see that the ring disappears. Where has the ring gone? The question is wrong because the ring never existed in the first place. What existed was only the fireball. In the same way, when the mind dissolves in samadhi, where does the world disappear? The question is wrong because the illusory world never ever existed. It was as illusory as any dream world. As the mind becomes purer and purer through sadhana, that mind develops the desire to know the truth. When the mind desires to know the truth, it will know the truth. And what is the truth? Knowing itself is the truth. There is no knowing of the world. There is only knowing itself. Ātmaņeva-ātmanā tuṣṭah. Self is knowing the self by itself and is contented in itself. Knowing continues. When the mind was impure, it was knowing the world, and when it becomes pure, now it knows the self. So the knowing continues. So when we know the self as it is, as pure I am, it is a culmination of evolution, where I know myself as Sat and Chit. And what is the result of this knowledge? Ananda is the result. Infinite bliss is the result, which is the third term. So the third term is Ananda, infinite bliss, absolute contentment, absolute fulfillment, joy, peace, a state free from all kinds of desires, doubts, fears and insecurities. More and more we are nearer the truth, greater and greater will be our experience. Will we experience a sense of fulfillment, a sense of perfection in us. As a result, we stop seeking anything from the world. Next one, the fourth one, Ananta, infinite. In our present state of ignorance, what do we find in ourselves? We experience ourselves to be finite. We experience as though we are only limited to this body. We feel as though the consciousness is limited to this body. Why do we feel so? The scriptures say it is due to anyonya adhyasa, mutual superimposition. Properties of consciousness are superimposed upon this body, and the properties of the body are superimposed on consciousness. So the infinite consciousness appears limited to this body, and the sentiency principle of consciousness appears in the body. So the inert body appears alive and sentient. This is called mutual superimposition. The infinite consciousness appears to be limited within the body, and on the other hand, the inert body appears to be sentient, like consciousness. The properties of one is seen in the other. The properties of the body is seen in consciousness, and the properties of consciousness are seen in the body. The infinite consciousness appears limited, and the inert body appears sentient. But why is it that we feel consciousness only within this body and not outside this body? Why don't we feel consciousness outside this body? The answer to this question is, we don't feel consciousness outside this body because Sukshma Sharira is not present outside the body. To experience, to know the existence of this body, you need Sukshma Sharira. That is a medium of experience. Outside the body, consciousness is there, but the medium to experience is not there. Therefore, we don't experience consciousness outside this body. Just like on a Purnima, on a full moon night, you see the bright moon in the sky. Why is it bright? Because of the sun's rays. Sun's rays are falling, therefore the moon appears bright. Does it mean that outside the moon there is no sunlight? Outside the periphery of the moon also there is sunlight, but then why is it dark? It is dark because there is no reflecting medium. Sunlight is present everywhere in the sky. Moon is able to reflect, therefore the moon appears bright. Outside the moon there is no reflecting medium, hence even though the sunlight is present outside the moon, the space outside the moon remains dark. In the same way, consciousness is felt in this body as life because of the presence of Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body, in this physical body. Outside this Sukshma Sharira is not present. Hence it appears as though consciousness is not present outside the body. Hence it appears as though consciousness is limited to this body, though consciousness is infinite. And because consciousness is infinite, the next term, the fifth term, it is achalaha, no movement, unmoving. Infinite cannot move. Movement is possible only from where you are to where you are not. Therefore, achalaha. Next one, sixth one, nityaha. Nityaha means eternal. It is also an extension of the term sat. Nityaha. But now the question is it parinami nityaha or kutastha nityaha? Parinami nityaha means eternal but constantly changing, like a perennial river. The river is eternal but the water changes constantly. Or like our body. Body appears to be eternal for 70 to 100 years, but every 6-7 years the cells in the entire body are replaced by the new ones. So the question is it parinami nityaha, changingly eternal, or is it kutastha nityaha, unchangingly eternal? And the next term, the seventh term, kutasthaha. Stha means that which remains. Kuta means anvil. Therefore, kutastha means that which remains like an anvil. So in a blacksmith shop, you must have seen the anvil. The blacksmith beats the red hot iron to shape by placing it on the anvil. The iron changes its shape, but the anvil remains changeless. In the same way, consciousness also remains changeless, allowing all the changes to happen around it. So Kūtastha means that which acts as a changeless substratum, allowing all the changes to happen around it. I, the consciousness, was the same in my baby body, in my teenager body, and in my adult body. And today, in my old infirm body also, I, the consciousness, remains the same. Body, mind, intellects have changed, but I, the experiencer, the knower of the body, mind, intellect, remain unchanged. What is the proof? The very fact that I can remember my past childhood days proves that I, the experiencer of the past, is the same as I, the one who remembers in the present. Which means the I in me has never changed. Changes have happened only to the body, mind, intellect, and not to the witness in me, the knower in me, the experiencer. Yes. The next one, the eighth one, Indriya Agocharaha. Indriya Agochara means that which cannot be known through the sense organs. Just like when we are using a telescope or a microscope. That scope has no scope to see the observer of the scope. External instruments cannot see the internal parts or the internal instruments. Consciousness enlivens the mind. The mind enlivens the sense organs. The sense organs enliven the golakas, and the golakas illumine the sense objects. There are so many subtle instruments within the gross instruments. So it is but natural that the external instruments can never know the innermost instruments. Just like the torch cannot illumine the battery inside. Indriya Agocharaha. The same logic goes for the next one also. The ninth one, Achintyaha. Achintyaha means the one which cannot be grasped by the mind. We cannot think of consciousness. We can only be conscious of thoughts. Subtle alone can grasp the gross. The gross cannot grasp the subtle. In some places in the scriptures, it is said that consciousness can be experienced through a pure mind. Now what does it mean? What it means is, a pure mind is a quiet mind. A quiet mind is a no mind. And when there is no mind, what remains is the subject alone, the pure consciousness alone. Next one, the 10th one, Aprameyaha, which can never become Prameya, the object of knowledge. Prama means knowledge, Pramata means knower, Prameya means the object of knowledge. This consciousness cannot become the object of knowledge because it is always the subject. Subject can never become an object. Therefore, Aprameyaha. 11th one, Anirdeshyaha, that which can never be pointed out or described. Why it cannot be described? To describe something, you need properties or gunas. That object is red in color. This thing is sweet in taste. So all these are properties. Now consciousness has got no such properties. And therefore consciousness is nirgunaha. And therefore anirdeshyaha. Free from gunas. Therefore anirdeshyaha. Indescribable. 12th one, Atma. Who is this consciousness? This consciousness is none other than me, myself. This consciousness is my higher nature, my true nature, my real nature, my real identity. This is what I am in the true sense, not what I understand myself to be in the present state of ignorance. Therefore, be happy. Whatever we have described till now about consciousness is our true description. It's a description of perfection. So even if you are not able to understand, doesn't matter. Let us be happy at least by hearing the description, such a perfect description about us. It is said Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi was once reading the Upanishads. So someone asked, Bhagavan, you have already realized the truth. Why do you want to read the Upanishads? Bhagavan said, yes, I just wanted to know what the scriptures have written about me. We feel so nice, isn't it, when somebody is praising us. The only difference here is, now the praise is about our real self and not our illusory, stupid ego. So when you read these scriptures, always try to feel it, internalize it, experience it. Never try to objectify it. Don't think that there is some consciousness somewhere which is mentioned in the scriptures, which is all perfect Satchidananda. The moment you objectify, you remain a mere scholar, an ignorant scholar. The moment you objectify, the spiritual knowledge remains merely an intellectual knowledge. The moment you objectify, you have kept God far, far away from you. Hence, subjectify it, feel it, internalize it. This is Nididhyāsana. In Shravanam, you listen. In Mananam, you clear all your doubts. And in Nididhyāsanam, you make that knowledge your own. You try to internalize it. You try to redefine your knowledge about yourself in the light of new knowledge. You try to identify yourself with a pure consciousness in you, the Supreme Self in you. Training the thoughts to think about myself in this way is called Nididhyāsanam. Next one, the 13th one, is Sākshī. Sākshī, witness, observer, observing everything. A silent observer, an uninterfering observer, a constant observer, an effortless observer, a peaceful observer, an undeniable observer. To the extent you can remain as a Sākshī, to that extent you will remain unaffected by the ups and downs of the world. To that extent, the external world will stop dictating terms to you. To the extent you forget the Sākshī, to that extent you will be carried away by the filthy waters of the Samsāric river. So the river of samsara is flowing. You have a choice, either to remain a mute, uninvolved witness at the banks of this river, or to get involved by jumping into it. The moment you jump into it, you flow along with the river. Then don't ask, why am I flowing? It was your choice. You had always a choice to remain in the bank and to watch the whole drama. But then you chose to enter and have fun. Now don't ask, why did God do this to me? God never pushed you into the samsara. You voluntarily jumped into it and became a samsari. This concept is beautifully described in Mundaka Upanishad with the help of a metaphor of two birds. Dvasuparna sayuja sakhaya samanam vriksham parishasvajate tayuranyas pippalam swadu atti anashnan anyo abhichakashiti. So there are two birds perched on the same tree. And what is this tree? This tree is none other than this body. Our body is this tree. So there are two birds perched on this body tree. One bird is eating the fruits of the tree, the other one never eating, just goes on watching. So what are these birds? Jivatma bird and Paramatma bird. So Jivatma bird, what is it doing? Pippalam swadu atti. It is constantly eating the fruits. What kind of fruits? The karma phala fruits. So we have done punya karmas, and therefore we have to go through the punya karma phalas, and they are sweet fruits. And then we have done papa karmas also. So we have to go through the papa karma phalas. And what kind of fruits they are? They are bitter fruits. So this Jivatma bird is constantly eating various kinds of fruits, enjoying its own karma phalas. And what about the Paramatma bird? Anashnan anyah abhijakashiti. The other bird, without eating any fruit, abhijakashiti, goes on watching. Without getting involved in the samsara, it is just watching. It is the Sākshī in us. It remains merely as an observer. And now what is the condition of this jiva? Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati muhyamanaha. So this jivatma bird, anishaya shochati muhyamanaha, totally helpless, powerless, miserable, drowned in fears and anxieties, full of sorrow, full of delusion. This is the condition of this Jivatma bird. All the miseries of this Jivatma bird is because the Paramatma bird has been ignored. So that is why in spirituality we use the term self-ignorance. Ignorance means that which has been ignored is called ignorance. So we don't experience Paramatma not because he is not there. We are not experiencing Paramatma because he has been ignored. Bhagavan is always there, but we are not there. We are so busy, and the poor Bhagavan is all the time waiting. And when that miserable Jivatma turns its attention to Paramatma, what does he see? Jushtam yada pasyatyanyamisham asya mahimanam iti vitashokaha. Jushtam yada pashyati anyam isham. And when he sees that Supreme Lord, when his attention turns to that Paramatma, what does he see? Asya mahimanam. He sees his glory. That Bhagavan who is Sarvatnyaha, Sarvashaktiman, Sarvavyapi, all perfect. When he sees that Lord as the very self in him, what happens to him? Asya mahimanam iti vitashokaha. He becomes free from all sorrows. So hold on to the Sākshī in us if we want to be free from all miseries of life. So the 13th term is Sākshī. Next one, 14th one, Akarta. Akarta means a non-doer. Consciousness doesn't do anything because it is Akarta. But then we say consciousness gives sentiency to the BMI. We say consciousness gives bliss. We say consciousness witnesses. Now these statements are all misleading because it makes us believe that consciousness is doing something. But in fact, consciousness does nothing. No action is involved. In order to make this point clear, Bhagavan gives a beautiful example. The example of fire. So we say, fire is cooking the food. It appears as though there is an action performed by fire. So now you go and ask the fire, oh dear fire, did you cook the food? Did you burn all my fuel? So what will the fire say? No, I did not do anything, but yes, in my presence, burning happened. In my presence, cooking happened. So there is effortlessness on the part of the fire. The nature of fire is to burn. So whenever we say nature, it implies effortlessness, it implies actionlessness. In the same way, consciousness lends sentiency effortlessly. No action is involved. Lending sentiency is the nature of consciousness. So consciousness lends sentiency to Sukshma Sharira. Sukshma Sharira in turn lends this borrowed sentiency to Sthula Sharira, and thus we have the inert body-mind intellect appearing live and sentient. So in the presence of consciousness, BMI functions. Lending sentiency is the nature of consciousness, like giving heat and light is the nature of sun. Like reflecting everything is the nature of mirror. Giving sweetness is the nature of sugar. No action is involved. In the same way, consciousness, without doing anything, remaining an akarta, lends sentiency to the body-mind intellect. But this consciousness, which is a non-doer, when it identifies with the body-mind intellect, the actions of the BMI appear to be the actions of consciousness. The rule is, whatever you identify with, the properties of that thing appear to be as though your properties. So when the non-doer consciousness identifies with the doer BMI, consciousness appear to be the doer. Thus Jiva is born, Ahankara is born. Jiva is none other than consciousness identified with the BMI. Now, I, the non-doer consciousness, think that actions of the body are my actions. Thus Karta, the doer, is born. Ego is born. Jiva is born. Karma is born. Karma phala is born. And thus birth, death cycles are also born. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. But the moment we identify with consciousness, instead of identifying with BMI, the moment we identify with consciousness, Jiva Bhava is gone, Kartrutva Bhava is gone, Samsara is gone. What remains is only consciousness. This is moksha. So next one, 15th one, abhokta. It is but natural that akarta should be abhokta, non-enjoyer. Karta alone becomes bhokta, akarta should remain abhokta. So this way all the 15 terms we have discussed. In Vivekachūdāmani we will find some of these terms repeated again and again. These repetitions are done because Vivekachūdāmani is basically a text for Nididhyāsana. So these 15 terms to a great extent cover almost all the terms appearing in our scriptures. Next topic we will see in the next class. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kasyid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.